heard they checking for me, no one checking on me, so I had to go run up a check. I got the message on me, ain't no flexing on me, my attorney gon' call and collect. Blessings on blessings for me, my successes only made them envious, they got upset. I had to put all their egos in check. I want the money, the power, respect, and I heard you.
Welcome everybody to The Big Picture. I'm AJ Riley moderating with Dylan Bear and Paul Rochon, your Midwest sports show from the GM's office. That big picture overview of how teams should run from some of the smartest guys around. And gentlemen, we are 8 days away from the NFL draft. And it is an exciting time, especially here in Detroit. And that's kind of what we want to spend our time talking about tonight, is the Detroit Lions draft. Dylan, I understand the Chicago connection and this being a Midwest show, but when you only get to spend your first pick at pick 39, is that correct? 39 yes. And then 48? You're kind of irrelevant at that point. So we're going to talk about the team that has multiple first-round picks and a very quick second-round pick, that being the Detroit Lions. And I want to start at number 2 because all the talk is around what are the Lions going to do at number 2. And Paul, I understand that there's probably about 3 options they could go with. What are those 3 options?
Well, 3 that I think would be acceptable options, of course. I do want to throw a little bit of shade at the Bears, not at Dylan's expense at all. But I would like the record to state that if myself or Dylan had been the GM of the Chicago Bears, they would have first-round picks because we would have never made that ill-advised Khalil Mack trade. Just getting that out on the record. But we're going to talk about Detroit tonight. Number 2, it's a pick you cannot afford to blow when you're at this point in the rebuild. You've successfully tanked for the most part. I'm not going to get into how they blew having number 1, but you have successfully tanked. The first scenario we're going to talk about is the one that's most unlikely, but at least lately is gaining some steam of being a possibility. Is Aiden Hutchinson there at 2? And is he the no-brainer pick at number 2? Because a lot of people will tell you that he's not. A lot of people will try to sell you on a guy like Tavon Walker, which...
Trayvon.
That's my reaction if we draft Tavon Walker. I'll walk out. You guys won't see me for a while.
He has an R in his name, Paul. Done. It's Trayvon Walker.
I know he does.
Okay.
No, I know he does.
All right, just making sure.
He doesn't deserve the R for respect. Okay, so we're gonna drop the R.
I know you didn't
not gonna
actually
do it.
Work that out in your head, but nice recovery.
What does that mean? What do you mean? This was preordained. Absolutely preordained. No. You have to take Aiden Hutchinson because he is the no-brainer. And the thing that annoys me the most about all the discussion around this, and you saw this before Thibodeau just dropped off the map in the first pick discussion. Like, he went from no-brainer, tank for Thibodeau, to all of a sudden, is he going to go in the top 5? And it is kind of rare. You normally don't see such a consensus top prospect drop like this. And there has been some maturity concerns. There's been some does he love football concerns. There's been some production issues. A lot of people, we've kind of, what is the expression I'm looking for? When we've jumped the shark, like we've gone too far in the other direction with him. Whereas now, overcorrected, there you go. We're not picking him in number 2. But he's not even in the discussion anymore. Now it's like, do you go Trayvon Walker at number 1 or 2?
According to Vegas, he's
do you
very
draft
much
one of the
in
tackles
play.
at number 1 or number 2? In play. It's crazy to me because the whole discussion this whole time was the ceiling, the perceived ceiling of Aiden Hutchinson. People say, oh, he's got this high floor. He had all this production in college. And listen, it might be a little bit to do with his skin color. You don't want to play that card, but for average fan, for whatever reason, when you start talking about floor and ceiling, so you shake your head, but how much of that, it's kind of like talking about a white receiver, right? In all of the narratives that go along with
Move
that.
on.
It's nonsensical.
Move on.
Yeah, this
Move on.
ain't it.
It is.
Move on.
It is things that people actually look at this.
Absolutely not.
It's true. Listen, you can shake your head all you want because you personally don't, but it is an actual thing that happens when discussing these players.
I forgot. Where did J.J. Watt go?
J.J. Watt went behind Aldon Smith because Trent Bulk picked Aldon Smith ahead of J.J. Watt because of a perceived higher ceiling. So thank you for so eloquently making my point for me.
Anyways, continue on with your Aiden Hutchinson talk.
Perfectly. What is hilarious about it is people act like Aiden Hutchinson is a stiff that doesn't move around. Aiden Hutchinson put on an elite 10-yard split. He blew away the 3-cone time. These are the most important things for a defensive end. Your agility score in the 3-cone drill. Your 40 time doesn't matter, even though his was fine in the 4.7s. But the 10-yard split from the 40, massive. This is an elite athlete, and we sit there and talk about him like he's a fat guy that just puts up numbers against people in college because it's college. He has a ceiling as high as any other edge rusher in this draft. He has all of the athletics. He has the film. He has the intangibles. The only thing that you could genuinely say is, his arms aren't freakishly long.
Yeah, so Paul,
he doesn't need it with a toolkit that he has.
You brought up Thibodeau, which I think is an interesting comparison because when the college football season even ended, it was Hutchinson and Thibodeau 1-2. Regardless of order, it was 1-2, right? Now, Dylan, I remember back to late August, early September, when you were a massive Thibodeau fan.
Yes, that is correct.
Should Thibodeau be considered a top 5 prospect still?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if we're really being honest about any sort of racial angle, how that doesn't work against Thibodeau as well with work ethic complaints, But either way.
But from here on out, let's leave the racial undertones out of the show.
All I'm saying,
it is a fan construct. It exists.
It washes both ways. Is my point, which makes it irrelevant both ways. Point being, Thibodeau was consensus number 1 overall. Then everybody started to have concerns because he sat out, and I don't believe he played in the bowl game. And there are some work ethic issues that are going on there. Now, whether you say it's on the field or otherwise, again, not important. But Thibodeau is actually mocked by Vegas with the best odds for the Lions pick. So I don't know where Paul's talking about that he's projected as no longer a top 5 pick. Also, the straw man of creating that everyone says that Aiden Hutchinson is not number 1 or not number 2 are.
That's not what I said.
Let's call a spade. The individual.
It's not at all what I said. At all.
Are Michigan State fans primarily, if we're being honest. Those are the people who are denigrating his abilities here. He, at least to me, looks like his potential is he will be a J.J. Watt level production without the injuries because he doesn't have that issue as far as we can see, which I know that for yourself, and I think for AJ as well, love J.J. Watt, so that should be a very nice comp. Evan Neal was the one, though, that for the longest time was projected as number 1 because of Jacksonville having the pick. He was the one who was number 1. And then Aiden all of a sudden leapfrogged both of them. And now we're getting the Trayvon Walker discussion, which is because they're the Jags. Let's be real. That's the only reason that anyone's even really talking about it is because they're the Jags. Because if it were any other even remotely competent team, it would either be one of those 3. And that's always what it's been, and that doesn't change for me. What Paul was saying about overcorrections, it's like an elastic band. Every year, this always happens. The consensus number 1 pick, people start because they stare at someone long enough. Eventually, you start to see the rough edges, and then you second guess yourself. And then people are like, I don't know. Then they drop. Then they come back. That's how all this has been. It's going to be, at least how it looks to me, is it's going to be Aiden, Thibodeau, Neal, 1, 2, 3, just like it was from the start.
Maybe not in that particular order, but
I think of that order, but.
So Paul, I understand Aiden is like your 1, right? That's your option 1, and I feel like options 2 and 3 are more of a 2A and a 2B, right? Like depending on how you were to rank them. So if Hutchinson is not there, maybe I'm wrong, you can correct me, but if Hutchinson's not there, the Jags take him at 1, what do the Lions do at 2?
So I'm going to be honest. Listen, I understand why this comes as a surprise. As much as I love Hutch and I think he's a no-brainer, can't miss prospect, my 2 is actually more like a 1B to Hutch's 1A. And if you really wanted to, you could probably talk me into this being better for the team long term. The problem with my number 2 is it's a pipe dream. It's never going to happen, and it frustrates me because I see it. Like, I can see this panning out in such a great way for the Lions, but I know in my heart of hearts that this isn't actually on the table. But I'm going to discuss it anyway. At least I put it out there. We know, and most Lions fans, I think, would agree, Taylor Decker makes a lot of money to be Taylor Decker. Taylor Decker is about a top 15-ish left tackle in the league, but he has some shortcomings. Last year was the only year that I would have said that about Taylor Decker, and he's really a pure pass blocker. His run blocking is bunk, but a good pass blocker on the left side of your line has a lot of value in the NFL, no matter how much heartache he causes for fans and how slow of a start he had to his career in Detroit. It still has a lot of value. You've seen a couple years ago what Laramie Tunsil went to the Texans when they were desperate to protect Deshaun Watson. He went for, I think, multiple first-round picks, or a first and a couple seconds and a third. Like, it was a package. It was a really nice package they got for him. And he is not as good. This was after he had kind of a down season, and he is not as good. It's clearly now not as good as Taylor Decker, right? So these guys are highly valued. You are going to get mid-first round value if you are able to move Taylor Decker, and you will have plenty of suitors. And whether it's literally a mid-first round pick in like a 18 to 23 range, or maybe it's a package of picks, a late first or a couple seconds, whatever it is, you're going to be able to move Taylor Decker. You absolutely will be able to move him. You can get that salary off your books. Obviously, the guaranteed money will accelerate this year, but that's not a big deal. We don't need the cap space. We're not contending, so it doesn't matter.
Is Taylor Decker the second pick? This is a lot to talk about.
He's not, but this is important because it's a total package. If you don't talk about this, the rest of it doesn't make any sense. So you trade Taylor Decker. You got to get Taylor Decker off your books and you get rid of him. Well, in number 2, you're replacing Taylor Decker. You're drafting your tackle. And whether it's Evan Neal from Alabama, whether it's the cat from NC State that everybody loves, that a lot of people think is better than Evan Neal, who, as some people project him at a guard at the next level, especially if he was to get drafted to the Lions, we weren't to trade Decker. I personally like Neal. I'm in love with his size. I'm in love with his run blocking. He's an awesome two-way player. You draft Evan Neal. You move Sewell to the left where he belongs. You got Evan Neal on the right. Well, okay, well, now we filled Decker's spot on the cheap, but now we have an extra draft pick to play with. And with that extra first-round pick, we can draft a guard of the future. And in a couple years, for guard of the future, I'm talking Kenyon Green. I think this guy is awesome. He's out of Texas A&M. I think he's going to be a freak in the NFL, and that's where he's going to go. He's going to go in the mid to mid-late first round, and he's going to be really good. In my opinion, if you hit on those guys, you now are looking at an offensive line of Sewell and Neal and Frank Ragnow, and you in a few years, you might have the best offensive line in the NFL. Mm-hmm. The most important unit you can have, you have turned into this complete strength. And then when you bring your quarterback in, it's a place he can thrive. It's a place your offensive coordinator can kind of call whatever he wants, because you have suddenly turned the most important unit in the league into the best in the league.
So that's interesting.
And that's a great place to be in a
You got to avoid being the Cowboys, though.
Well, but that's
Literally,
interesting,
that's
Paul,
what happened.
because that plan, in essence, flips the script on what the entire narrative this offseason has been, which is defense, right? And you're talking about going O-line. If you make the trade for Taylor Decker, right? Like, to be clear, if you trade Taylor Decker, you're saying you use 2 first-round picks, and then you still have, 32? So you would use the first two picks off the board for offensive linemen, which shifts the narrative. Dylan, what do you think? Like,
I look.
It's interesting. I haven't thought of that perspective.
We Paul and I are in agreement. We're with the way that we kind of view roster construction, like building on a strength like that. Absolutely, do it. It won't happen though. I'm with him in that regard. Like, that's kind of why I was like, all right, get on with it, because all of this Taylor Decker talk is like pipe dream stuff, and you just wasted like a minute and a half on something that's not happening. So, with that in mind, not to be that dismissive, because it's a great idea and concept that I co-sign, but in terms of like, it's Thibodeau or Aiden, whichever one falls to you. in my opinion. I don't think there's a loss in that regard. Now, the third option, which is actually the one I think is the best idea, which Paul also agrees with me on, which I'll maybe not necessarily using that pick, but more on that in a minute. But yeah, I edge rusher, the whole defensive deal. My kind of thing for the Lions is like go Georgia all the way, like Nakobe Dean and
Jordan Davis.
And Jordan Davis later, obviously. I remember there was mocking that Jordan Davis was going to be going to the Lions at 2. I think that one thing that's kind of just reflective that is a bit hilarious is like I don't remember a time where the Lions got this many different players sincerely mocked to them. I mean, we're talking at least a half a dozen guys.
And another cornerback recently, too.
Well, yeah, the cornerback. For the life of me, I can't remember his name. Sauce. Yeah, Sauce Gardner.
Kenny Pickett?
Yeah.
Oh, you said corner. I thought you said cornerback.
No, corner. So you have Malik Willis, who is being seriously discussed, Trayvon Walker, Jordan Davis at one point, Aiden, obviously, if he's there, Kayvon Thibodeau, if he's there, Evan Neal, and then, the list is huge.
Yeah.
So, what do we really know? Which is all the more reason why I say trade back.
And that was a perfect segue into, I think, this third option, right, Paul? Is if there's that many people on a list that are sincerely mocked to the Lions, isn't there value in being a little bit further back in the draft?
He didn't even mention Kyle Hamilton.
No,
and it's kind of
right?
It's a no-brainer since we're picking at number 2, but it's a testament to how bad of a team we are, how many holes that we have, that you could realistically mock all of these players here, and none of them would be this crazy surprise. As Dylan alluded, option 3 is, of course, a trade down. And this is why a trade down becomes so important. If you are unwilling to take the best player available, so we assume Hutch is off the board, and you are unwilling to draft Evan Neal or the NC State tackle, whose name I don't want to butcher.
That's what we're going to call
I have pronunciation problems, and I don't want to do it. I mispronounce names all the time, so I'm going to play it safe here. If you're unwilling to take the best player available, you are doing your team a disservice if you make a pick at that point. You're hurting your team. You're not getting... We always talk about how important it is to be efficient in building your team, in your roster management. In the draft, efficiency is absolutely king. So you have to trade down, and everyone's going to say, oh, it's hard to trade down. Nobody wants to trade up. There's not a quarterback available. The players aren't good enough. That's not true. There will always be offers when you have a top pick like this. The problem is the offer going to be what you want? You're not going to get 3 first-round picks because they're not trading up for Trey Lance, right? That's not what the trade is. We don't have that trade up for a quarterback. But you're telling me that someone's not going to give up an extra 3rd or 2nd-round pick to get the tackle of their choice? Or they're not going to trade up to secure. Maybe they want Sauce Gardner, and they're worried about a team getting him, right? So somebody is going to be willing to trade up. You just might not get the package of your dreams. But even if it's a little bit, you can secure that extra draft capital, and now you're not making a reach. And a reach matters more than just mental acuity. A reach matters because these draft picks have slotted contracts, and you're talking about, if you pick 6 picks later, you're talking about millions and millions of dollars in cap savings that you're not paying out to get a guy that's at a similar tier of a prospect that you would have picked anyways at 2. Mm-hmm. Why am I going to take Kyle Hamilton at 2 when he might be there at 6, right? Yeah. Why would I do that? If you're not taking, or you don't, listen, I could very much see Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell saying, you know what, Thibodeau is great, but he's not a fit here. And I'm not saying I agree with that, but I could see them having that discussion and coming to that conclusion. We saw similar things when Bob Quinn was here. It wouldn't be shocking. If you're not willing to go that route to take the upside, you're not willing to take the best player available, you have to trade down and get some value, even if it's not what you expected. My dream is we trade down into the 8 range and not draft Sauce Gardner. I want to take who I think is the best cornerback in this draft. I want to take Derek Stingley Jr. He's had injury issues. It's the only reason that he is going to be available outside the top 3. If he never gets hurt in college, he is way off the board before this is even, you can even think about this. If we could trade down, get capital, and get Stingley, oh my goodness.
So we're going to get to a hypothetical, picture perfect moment, okay, in a second. But Dylan, you're the one that brought up trading.
Yeah.
out of 2. Why? What's the
So
Paul's led off with kind of like the benefit of it, but like again with that list of players, is it the best move out of maybe all 3 that have been mentioned tonight anyway?
yeah, I mean, that's kind of the Paul already mentioned it. I led off with it that like you're getting mocked so many different individuals means that like we as much as we want to say act like all of these players are surefire, and I know that Paul, for what I feel are ulterior motives, thinks that Hutch is like guaranteed surefire, what have you. This is one everybody has talked about how this draft is insane in the sense that like none of these guys are really surefire deals. I'm not certain about any of them, to be honest. Honestly, it's a value sentiment basically that like for example one player that I'm certain is going to be phenomenal is Nakobe Dean, but am I really gonna draft him that high? No, obviously not. And so part of the reason I know he'll work out from a value perspective is because of where he's going.
Right.
Whereas these individuals in the top 10, Evan Neal makes sense because you're making your strength even better. So like that just intrinsically is something that's appealing. But in terms of all these other players, like Thibodeau very well could have a Jadeveon Clowney aspect to him. That's something that like after the season was kind of where I kind of hit the brakes because I was like, oh man, there's a lot of Clowney in him. And like same thing with Hutch with like a JJ Watt comparative. What if he is injured, which is never something you can project for.
Right.
That's why trading in this specific draft, there are suckers out there. One in particular, the Carolina Panthers. That is a very desperate organization. Matt Rule he's on the outs if this doesn't land. And they're going to get from their owner, who's very aggressive, he's going to demand a quarterback. Demand it. So take their first round pick, take their second this year and next year. That's not that big a haul. They would absolutely do that. Find a sucker is basically what I'm saying. You have been, well, not you actually, my team has been the sucker 3 times. So find your sucker in this draft. That is my thesis statement for the Lions. Find a sucker to exploit.
Yeah, I think that you brought up a good point, right? Like trading makes so much sense because it's so dependent upon what this type of draft is, right? There isn't that clear-cut order 1, 2, and so getting out of those picks that don't necessarily have that high upside or value at 2 to get more capital and value makes so much more sense. We're going to shift our perspective a little bit. And gentlemen, we have 3 picks. Detroit Lions have 3 picks in the top 34. All right. They have number 2. They have 32. They have 34. Lay out for me with no trades. Okay. We're not gonna offer trades at this point. You have to use those 3 picks.
Okay.
And I know that it's draft specific, but in a perfect world, those 3 picks are who, Dylan?
So second overall is going to be Thibodeau. I mean, like just realistically, that is. I would take Thibodeau more, but that's also because I just really believe in this elastic effect. And when it comes to effort, that's just something you kind of got to risk with a guy that has the potential that he does. He doesn't have the output that Hutch has. I don't pretend that that's not the case. I do disagree with Paul, though, in that he states that Hutch has the highest ceiling. I don't agree. I think that Thibodeau does. I feel like if he really were to live up to the potential that made him the number 1 overall in the first place, that's a great ad. Then in 32, I already said it. It's not going to happen, but you said in an ideal circumstance, it would be Nakobe Dean. This reeks of the the draft. Paul and I had a show way back in the day called The War Room, and I was the one who stated that TJ Watt was the one that the Lions needed to get. And I also was like, this is where the Steelers are going to do this. This feels like a Steelers move. Lo and behold, what happened, and now TJ Watt is arguably the best linebacker in the league.
Gerard Davis here, right?
Yes, yep. Now, in Paul's credit, he also called that the Lions were going to take Jared Davis. So that was funny.
And was not happy about it, to be
you weren't.
exceptionally
Even at the time,
clear.
you weren't. You caught. We were both right on two different sides of that. But like Nakobe Dean is actually one where I would trade 32 and 34 to move up and get him. But in this ideal world, he drops down to 32 unrealistically and gets past all the other competent teams that would absolutely make him just like a Patrick Queen type guy. And then for 34, I would actually probably take. I think it's George Pickett, if I'm not mistaken, from Georgia, the receiver. Paul and I do not agree on the level of value for wide receivers. We agree that they are not as valuable as everyone else does, but I do love possession receivers like a lot. If it were up to me, I would have just possession receivers all over the floor to where I just toss it up and you will lose every single time. If my timing is right, you will never have an advantage, which is why I hate corners. So I would take the big receiver at 34. But that's also because you have Nakobe Dean on you. But so there you go.
Interesting.
Well, watching Brandon Marshall and Allen Robinson in Chicago, I can understand why you would feel that way.
Yeah. And we don't have a lot of speedsters. That wasn't ever really.
I do want my possession receivers to have hands, though, and we may have to check Pickett's.
Yeah. Well, Drake London would be, but he's not going to be there either. So.
Paul, what's your ideal scenario for those 3 picks, no trades, have to use them?
So I'm gonna give you a little extra because I want to go over a couple of options because So listen, obviously Hutchin number 2, right? But Hutchin number 2 is not happening. If we're not trading, if we're locked into this, I'm taking Evan Neal at 2. Okay. And if the front office values the other tackle from NC State, whose name I will not say better, that's fine. Take him too. But you take one of the tackles at 2 if Hutch isn't there. I would also be fine with Thibodeau. And I will defend him on this. Like I said, I think we've gone too far in the other direction of critiquing him. I agree he's not the number 1 prospect, but the way that people have viewed him and that now they think he's going to be a bust, it's absurd. And I think this has a little bit of a couple years ago in the NBA, who went number 1 to the Timberwolves. I'm blanking on his name. Anthony Edwards. Yep. He was really good. He was the number 1 prospect for a long time, but people knocked his love for the game and how much he tried and his effort. And they said he messed up his interview, right? Because he said he doesn't love basketball the most. He likes football more than basketball, stuff like that. I get the Clowney comparison and I agree with it, but if you want to see the flip side of how he could be still really good in a comparison, I think Anthony Edwards really fits the bill in the NBA. I know it's a little cross-talk sports-wise, but I like that. That's what we're doing it too. We got to take one of those players. Have to. If you don't, it's an absolute mistake. Don't take Kyle Hamilton at number 2, even though he could be cool. It's not worth number 2. We're slipping down. We don't have a mid-first round pick because we didn't trade Taylor Decker. So now I'm waiting to see who falls at number 32. And I absolutely do not think this guy is going to be there, but I have seen him mocked there. I really, really, really bad want Daxton Hill. You talked about addressing the defense, AJ, and I wouldn't be upset if we went our first 8 picks on defense. I wouldn't be upset at all because defense needs it way more. Obviously, if we can make offensive line a huge strength, I will love it. Here's the thing with Daxton Hill. 1, he's the clear-cut second best safety in the draft. And safety, outside of a big edge rusher, is by far the biggest need on this defense. The thing about Daxton Hill, and the reason to me that his draft stock has been hurt a little bit, even though he's probably going to go in the mid-first, so how hurt really is it? The thing with him is he was used out of position at Michigan out of necessity. It wasn't the coaches didn't know where to play him. It was that we had to use him in a nickel hybrid role because that's what our defense needed, and that's how we needed to move him around. As a free range safety like he's meant to be, with his 4.3 speed and his excellent play recognition, he is a screen monster. Put on the tape and watch what he does to teams when they try to come out of the backfield with some trickery. His play recognition is elite. His agility and his sprint times are elite. He is a great athlete to put on the back end of your defense and just let him run around and make plays. Be that last line of defense. The thing that scares me with Kyle Hamilton is the tackling, right? Daxton Hill doesn't have those issues. I think he can be a value, but I think he's going to be gone by then. So I got to give you some other options. I'm going to give you 2 quick. Lewis Sign, safety out of Georgia. Excellent in the box safety. You can throw him in the back if you need to. And this is legitimately, and it can be a knock or a good thing depending on your perspective. This is the best defense in the history of college football, in my opinion. Lewis Cine was a huge part of that. He is a really good athlete. He's really good in the box. You can throw him in the box, throw Tracy Walker on the back end, mix him up. He really can cover the back end if you need him to, but I love him as a box safety. This kid is going to be good. And the other guy, listen, Kenyon Green's not going to be there at the end of the first. I don't see it happening. If he was, it's obvious. But there is another guard that I like a lot, and it's the kid, Dion. I'm blanking on his name now. It's the kid from Boston College.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my goodness. Zion Johnson. That's his name, not Dion. Zion Johnson. I just remembered. He is going to be really good. And Joe Thomas did a nice segment for NFL Network, actually. Obviously, Joe Thomas, left tackle for the Cleveland Browns for 100 years. Surefire Hall of Famer if he's not already, and I'm not sure exactly when he retired. It's his favorite offensive line talent in the draft, and I agree with him. I think Zion Johnson's going to be sweet at guard, and we have a big need at guard. There is no doubt about that. So that would be pick of that pool of players. I want to see a few of those come off the board in the top 34 for the Lions. That's what I would like.
Oh, so so of those 3 players that you named at the back end, you want 2 of them chosen at 32 and 34.
At 32 and 34.
I was kind of waiting for you to go point by pick by pick, because I was about to say, if you say David Ojabo at 34, since you went Hutch and Daxton Hill, we would know.
Well, hold on.
The most predictable thing.
So
ever.
listen, and it's absurd.
Ever.
But if you think it's so biased,
It is.
if you think it's biased,
I'm kidding.
Put on the video.
I know, I'm kidding.
No, but Dylan's not.
I'm
on the
not,
video
because
from a few
you
weeks
said
ago.
you would rather have Daxton Hill over N'Kobe Dean. I don't agree even slightly.
I don't agree with that.
That's not what I
either.
said. N'Kobe Dean's not going to be there, so it doesn't matter.
Right, but I had
that's not what I
N'Kobe
said.
Dean there too, and you said Daxton Hill, and they're going to be in the same range, and you said Daxton Hill instead.
I didn't say Daxton Hill over N'Kobe Dean, so don't put words in my mouth.
Okay, so therefore we agree. So therefore it's more justifiable. You were acting like Daxton
I'm assuming
Hill over everyone.
no. I'm assuming N'Kobe Dean's gone. I just really like Daxton Hill to fill that safety
You
spot.
are redeemed.
But anybody, I would like. Listen, some people are going to say, "Oh, you're in Detroit Sports Nation. You're a Michigan fan. You like Michigan players." Anybody that thinks I have a bias towards Michigan players, a few weeks ago, me and AJ did a piece on David Ojabo. I am in the exceptional minority that I would not take David Ojabo in the first 3 rounds, and I lay that case out pretty succinctly. So that's my Michigan bias.
So I first of all want to echo what Dylan said. If there's any way, and to kind of measure what both of you have said, if you could draft Evan Neal, trade Decker, have a mid-first round pick, and get N'Kobe Dean, oh my goodness. I would probably hand over a lifetime contract to Brad Holmes in that instant, right? I would be so thrilled that we actually had
32 and 34. Have to do it. If he is at 24 or something,
right.
Got to do it.
Maybe. But again, I would have no problem with it, because N'Kobe Dean has been my guy since that semifinal game, because I was like, oh my gosh, I want this guy on the Lions. He's very, very good. But I'm not part of the show.
That's your Michigan bias because he killed us.
No, truthfully, if you want my honest opinion on N'Kobe Dean, I don't mean to take some time, but that swing pass that they threw to Blake Corum and he ran all the way across the field and tackled him for a loss. I was like, that's a player. I want that guy. But let's go big picture now in the draft, right? We talked about the first 34 picks, 3 of them for the Detroit Lions. Let's talk general draft, okay?
Yep.
And we need to keep this to, a quick, maybe 5 minutes each. But what do you want to see the Lions address through this draft and the number of picks that they do have? Paul, go ahead.
So, contrary to what I've said, I really am all about defense. And I'm not trying to contradict myself, but I know I was heavy on the offensive line in the first. That's because I see, and you guys know, I think offensive line is the most important unit in football. And I see in this draft, I really like some of this offensive line talent. I am partial to it. And I see a chance to have an elite strength. And if you can make any unit in the NFL elite, especially one that important, I think it can do wonders for your team. Outside of offensive line, and I literally mean that, I almost want to go all defense this draft. I have kind of a couple late picks, if you're in 5th round, 7th round, I don't care what you do. But the serious picks, the picks that matter, I want to go defense. I'm going to throw out a couple names. Jojo Doman, cornerback from Nebraska, cornerback, linebacker, kind of a hybrid guy. He's really athletic, much more than he gets credit for. That Nebraska defense was a mess. It wasn't because of him. They had him doing everything possible. And I think he's kind of a sleeper guy in maybe the late second, early third, or if he falls even further. I like what he brings size-wise, speed-wise, ability, just coverage ability-wise. I think he's a really underrated player that just not a lot of people talk about. Cam Taylor-Britt, cornerback, Nebraska. I mean, this is...
Two Nebraska corners?
Yes, which is crazy because...
Their defense was good. It was.
Domon played a little bit all over. This is probably crazy because I hate Nebraska. People are like, what the hell is wrong with you? I hate Nebraska. Nebraska's defense wasn't that good, and the team's been a mess, but I really like the potential of these players. Listen, Cam Taylor-Britt, this is a late pick. We're talking 6th round pick, right? He's going to be there late. This is a flyer. I always talk about quarterbacks being lottery tickets. These are lottery tickets. But I like the upside that he might have there. That's a couple later round defensive guys that I think are going to be around. I would have loved Nolan Smith out of Georgia as one of those later round guys, but he went back to school. So I lost that target. He's not even in the draft. Going back to offense, a lot of people really want the Lions to get a second tight end. And I am not of the opinion that we need a second tight end super bad. I think Hawk is pretty sweet. He's effective. He does what he needs to do. And we don't have to get another tight end. But another team that I loathe, Jeremy Ruckert from Ohio State. And if you look up his stats, you're going to be like, why? Why would you want to take this kid? And I'm going to tell you why. Because he is elite. He is absolutely an awesome receiving threat at tight end. The problem is Ohio State and Ryan Day don't give two bleeps about their tight ends. They don't design the offense to throw to the tight end. Their quarterbacks don't look to throw to the tight end. It's not his fault. Honest to God, if he went to Georgia or if he went to Iowa, I don't think he would fall out of the second round. I honestly don't. This kid is really, really good. Talk to people around the program. Talk to other coaches that scout Ohio State. Watch film and listen. You're not going to get what you want out of it because he was not a target of that offense and their 18 first-round receivers. This kid is really good, and if he's there in the 4th, 5th, 6th round, that could be a really good number 2 tight end for you at a pick that you often don't get a lot of production out of. And then the last one, I'm going to give you a 7th-round flyer, just a complete flyer. Jamari Saylor, tackle from Georgia. He's going to be there late. This is going to be a 6th, 7th round pick. He's got upside. He's a 330-pound, 6'4" monster. He has versatility. He can play guard. He can play tackle. He is the nice kind of swing backup caliber prospect that you want on a line so that if a guy gets injured, whether it's a guard, whether it's a tackle, he can fill you there. He could develop into a good 6th lineman. And maybe you get lucky and hit the lottery and he ends up starting caliber. You're not expecting that. That's a 6th, 7th round pick, but he can be a good swing 6th, 7th offensive lineman. If you need him, break glass in case of emergency. That's all you can hope for with these late round picks, so I wouldn't mind going in that direction. But I would love to see an emphasis on defense throughout this draft outside of the offensive line.
Fantastic. Dylan, general draft thoughts.
I have a general rule that is going to sound like a stupid fan slogan, but I promise it's like there's actual reasoning behind it. In the first 2 rounds, if you go Georgia, you can't go wrong. It sounds simple, but Paul was very correct in that defense. I don't know if I'd say that for a college unit it was the best, but in terms of NFL prospects, it is by far the best defensive talent we've seen probably since the Deontay Hightower year of Alabama, something like that. One of those years, like 11, 12. Any Georgia player, whether it's Trayvon Walker, Nakobe Dean, George Pickens, Jordan Davis, even Deontay Wyatt, any of those kind of guys in any of your picks is just one you can't go wrong. Scene is another one who I've seen the Lions at 34. He literally is being mocked between 32 and 36. And so, you can't go wrong there. In terms of non-Georgia players, there are 2 in particular, both very close to each other. So Nakobe Dean is what I just looked at, a mock for CBS had Nakobe Dean 28th to Green Bay. If he gets to 28 and you're not trading up for him, there's something wrong with the front office, in my opinion. I have been very much against the sensationalist free agency trade for this guy, whatever. But like Nakobe Dean being that close to you, do not repeat the T.J. Watt deal. I promise. There's another guy though who I actually think may be better than Nakobe Dean, and he just screams Patrick Queen to me. Is Devin Lloyd, linebacker out of Utah. He is incredible and very fast, which in the modern game matters infinitely more. For the Chicago Bears, one thing that, like, Roquan Smith is by far my favorite Bear. It's not even close. And part of the reason why Roquan Smith is very good at what he does is because he is lightning fast. They are the size, they are just small, a little bit smaller than what defensive ends are, but much more versatile, which you need with a much more pass-heavy type of attack that you see in the NFL. Devin Lloyd, got to do it. He actually would be my priority over Nakobe Dean, but Nakobe Dean is more gettable. I don't see Devin Lloyd going any further than 20. That's how good I think he'll be. The other one is kind of obvious, same range, Drake London. Drake London is book it going to be the best receiver in this draft. Metrics support that. His catch rate over 30 yards is better than any receiver in the draft. His drop rate is very low. He is a phenomenal, productive, big receiver. I love possession. And to be fair, Lions need possession. Drake London, could literally go for any team in this range. Drake London, Devin Lloyd, Nakobe Dean. The teams who get those players are getting all pros. That's how I feel about those three.
Fantastic. Paul, you want to clarify something real quick?
I do. It stuck with me when you said the two cornerbacks from Nebraska that I may have been selling JoJo Domann as a cornerback, sorry. We're drafting him as a coverage linebacker. He split time. He kind of moved all over the place, nickelback linebacker at Nebraska. He is a linebacker with elite coverage skills at that position, something that I value very highly in the NFL. And if it wasn't for having multiple ACL surgeries, I think he would be off the board in the first 2 rounds. I think that is a potential value as a coverage linebacker, something that the Lions desperately, and I mean desperately need. So I just wanted to clarify that. Not drafting him as a cornerback.
Fantastic. Well, gentlemen, we have come to that time in the week where we have called it get whatever you want off your chest moment, or whatever type of therapy you might need, right? Just your big pictures for the week as it pertains to whatever you want to talk about. So, Paul, what's your big picture for the week?
Well, I'm sticking with the draft theme. Since this is a draft show, since we're not doing a show next week because we're doing a big draft show live for the first round of the NFL draft. So my big picture really sticks with this theme of the draft. And this goes for every team. This is applicable to everyone. It's very applicable in Detroit, of course, because this draft is so important for us. And we have a new regime, a new front office. Brad Holmes last year is his first year. This is his second year. Everyone's kind of still in wait and see mode. What is this guy going to be? Everyone thinks he's pretty good. He makes some intelligent decisions, and he most notably hasn't made any horrible decisions. And my big picture is that no matter what happens in this draft, and whether you like the players that you got or don't like the players that you got, the most important thing, and this goes for honestly everything in life, but especially managing a team in sports, it is all about the process over the results. And people are so results orientated, but you can do things the right way and have a negative result. And on the flip side, you can do things the wrong way and have a positive result. But if you do the correct thing over and over and over again, you are much more likely to have a higher hit rate of success, both in life and in sports. And that's why as a GM, it's all about the process. If we at number 2 take Kyle Hamilton, and Kyle Hamilton ends up as the best safety in the league, I still don't love that pick because of the value that it represented at the time. If we had a crystal ball and any GM knew how all of these players were going to pan out, they would win the Super Bowl every year, right? Because you would get steals all through the draft. You draft 7 new starters every season. You'd win the Super Bowl every single season. We don't know how these players are going to get out. What we do know and we do understand is value, and that is a huge part of the process. You cannot make poor trades. You cannot afford to make big reaches, especially with picks like number 2 or even in the first round at 32. You have to do things that maximize the potential efficiency of your team. The New England Patriots suck at drafting. And people are going to say, what do you mean they suck at drafting? No, they suck at drafting. The reason the Patriots were able to keep a competent team around Tom Brady and have a competent defense that Bill Belichick could lead for so many years is because they had more picks than everybody else. So even though they sucked at using them, they hit on enough of them. And then on the flip side, they used some of those picks, those later round low success rate picks, to get established players in the NFL, veterans that they knew that they could perform, or at least play a role on their team that would benefit the Patriots. And that's how they kind of beat the system for a long time. Even though as strict talent evaluators, the Patriots did not have a great track record. Look at how many second-round receiver busts they had, right? And it's not, receiver's a deep position. How many Aaron Dobbs do we need to see come into the league and go nowhere? They weren't good talent evaluators, but they understood the process. They understood how this league works. And as long as you follow that process, you will be successful over time. You can get lucky. Anybody can get lucky. You got to do the right thing. You have to maintain efficient. And I want everybody to keep that in mind throughout their team's drafts, especially here in Detroit as we're trying to evaluate Brad Holmes going forward.
All right. I agree. Trust the process, right? Trust the process and do the right thing. Dylan, what is your big picture for the week?
My big picture for this week is going to be a complete tonal shift from the previous 2 that I've done. And the reason for that is because my absolute favorite player is coming back. Oscar Tshiebwe is coming back to college. I am beyond ecstatic. And part of the reason for that is because Oscar Tshiebwe has made a major decision, and I'll be honest, I have to thank NIL for it. If it weren't for the NIL, for Oscar Tshiebwe, from what most guesses are, is that he is making about $2 million with his NIL deal. And the evaluation, though, is coming from his camp, is that he is going to rake in that NIL money again, which is going to be more money than he would make on a rookie contract, because Oscar Tshiebwe is a more pure type of center. His type of style is not really for the modern NBA. If you go back to our first episode, you can hear a lot about Paul and I's opinion in that regard about the flow of the game and whatnot. And so, like Kobe Coburn, for example, he did go to the draft. He did declare. But Oscar Tshiebwe, who was a better player, won an award winner this year, decided to come back. And it's just incredible to say that. That's not a thing that college basketball has had. It's not, the sport got a win today that it really hasn't had before. I love Tshiebwe. He was just absolutely not the reason why Kentucky lost that game to St. Peter's. I want to make that very clear. Anybody who hears Kentucky from now moving forward is going to be like, oh, St. Peter's, ha ha ha. He literally is the only reason that game was even close. He balled out. He's a traditional kind of back to the basket type of brawny big guy. It's all the more reason why I like him. He would be, if he were in the Big Ten, he would be just a monster. Everybody would either love or absolutely hate him. It's just good to have him back. This is, I hope, kind of a seminal moment for the sport of college basketball and maybe college sports in general, because this could create a watershed moment where there are other players in Tshiebwe's position, Wooden Award winners, All-Americans, All-Conference, who are making those talent evaluations where is it really worth it, fiscally speaking now, because of how NIL works, is it really worth it for me to go in the mid to late rounds of the NBA rather than come back? Maybe either develop my game to where, for Tshiebwe's sake, maybe he gets a more consistent mid-range or long-range shot, and then he goes up in the draft. And if not, you made $2 million. That's more than you were going to make if you were going into the league. And it's not like your placement in the draft is somehow going to change because of that, barring injury, of course, which we obviously don't want on him. But this is why NIL had to happen. This potential for this type of player to come back. That is why, even though it is a free market, it's crazy, and it's kind of off the rails at the moment, this is exactly the fulfillment of the promise that NIL had for the sport of college basketball, especially, but college sports in general. It's nice to see this happen. It's worth every penny. I'm just so glad to see Oscar coming back for another round of college basketball. And I just hope many, many other players, great, fantastic college players, follow in his massive footsteps. Oscar, I am glad, I should say, to have you back.
Fantastic. Well, gentlemen,
I know. Hold on. I know
ahead.
it won't make the big picture part of it, but I would like to add on a little, just a teeny bit, because I love that. That was uplifting, for one, from Dylan, especially regarding college sports. That was uplifting and fabulous. But this is what NIL was meant for. This is the kind of guy, I know, and it's so perfect. It's not meant to buy players and get them to come to your school. It's for your stars to be able to stay in school and get paid for it. Right. But what's unique about his situation, what Dylan didn't actually mention, is he's not from US and he's here on a school visa, and he actually wasn't able to get NIL previously, and the school has helped him, and they have had, I don't want to say pull strings because I don't know the exact process they went through, but they have had to make a lot of arrangements so that he can stay and get that NIL money, which is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. But of course, when you're here on a school visa, you're not supposed to be making money and stuff. So it's so nice to see this happen. And of course, this fits the bill all across, especially for centers, but really across the sport. Hunter Dickinson local, another perfect example. In previous years, he would have been off to the NBA to play in the G League or whatever it was going to be. This is awesome for the sport, and I think it's rekindled a little of Dylan's love for the sport.
I love Tshiebwe. I'm so glad he specifically. Like, if it was Kofi instead, I'd be like, that's cool, whatever. But like Tshiebwe coming back, especially because of the way that Kentucky's run ended, I'm like, oh, thank God. Oh, I'm so happy to see you back.
We're just a, pool of positivity tonight to end.
It's kind of Midwest too.
And that's
Kentucky,
fantastic for sure.
But,
it's, Midwest adjacent, and it works.
Yeah.
But tonight, that is going to do it for us here at The Big Picture. This GM level view of sports, specifically in the Midwest. As Paul mentioned earlier, we will be with you live. You'll see these three faces and maybe a few other faces as well live next Thursday night for the first round of the NFL draft. And we'll see if what we've been talking about is actually accurate, or if there's somebody out of left field maybe walking through the cornstalks like Joe Jackson did in Field of Dreams. Who knows? But we will be there live to cover it, and it will be a guaranteed good time. So we'll see you then. For Dylan Bear and Paul Rochon, I am AJ Riley, and we will see you next week.
Man on a mission, I'ma get it. You know I be on a what? Yeah.